Well, hello and welcome. As you can see, the weather has turned cool in my neck of the woods. I'm at the Okeechobee County Fairgrounds this weekend for a clinic, uh, cow horse clinic that I'm attending, and it's getting cold here. We're having a cold front come through, so it's felt hat and wild rag weather here way down south. We're going to do something a little different today. I had a heavy heart the last couple of weeks. I'll tell you why in a little bit. But as you know, I've started adding a little segment to the beginning of Cowboy Church that I call Cowboyology. And I'm going to devote our whole time this morning to some cowboyology because the cowboy world, the Western sports and Western music world lost three of our greats in 2022, and I'd like to just spend some time uh, um, memorializing them, uh, perhaps bringing back some memories or adding to your knowledge of these three gentlemen who we lost, or maybe introducing them to you for the first time. So I'm going to start out first by and go by the order of date of death. And on June 12th, of 2022, we lost Baxter Black. I'll bring his name up there for you, Baxter Black, so you can remember and maybe perhaps look him up. I'm going to give you some homework at the end. Baxter was a large animal veterinarian. He was born in Brooklyn, New York, of all places, but he actually grew up in Las Cruces, New Mexico, and then attended veterinary school in Fort Collins, Colorado, at the Colorado State University Veterinary School. And he specialized in large animals and went into large animal practice. But he had a knack for cowboy poetry, particularly in most cases the humorous kind. And he was an author of many books of cowboy poetry or cowboy culture, cowboy logic, and was a regular on RFD TV. He was also a regular for a long time on National Public Radio and a frequent guest on the Johnny Carson show. He was quite the raconteur, as you might say, the best way to describe Baxter. He had this big, monstrous mustache, and he was quite witty and very clever with words. And I'm going to recommend that you do a little homework and get to know Baxter a little better. So I'm going to put up there a couple of his works that you can find on YouTube. So all your homework is on YouTube. I realize some of you are watching me on YouTube as well as Facebook. But when we're done here, when you have time, I want you to look up a couple of his works. And if you like those, it'll offer you some more. And you can get to know Baxter better, as well as you can buy his books on Amazon. So just go on Amazon. I did yesterday, and just type in Baxter Black, and you'll find lots of cool stuff there that you can buy. But first one I want to talk about is Baxter Black did a piece called "A Horse Matters." So check this out. This is part of your homework. Check out "A Horse Matters." This is more of a exposition rather than a poem. But I think you'll like it. I like it a lot. I watch it frequently. I've memorized parts of it. Another one that will bring tears to your eyes, I'm quite certain, unless you have never owned a dog. And that one is called "Just a Dog." And it's quite touching. It'll probably make you get a little misty-eyed. I mean, cowboys don't cry, right? But sometimes you get a little dust in your eye or something. And then finally, after that, I would like you to check out this one. This is an appearance on the Johnny Carson show. There's a couple of versions out there, but the Johnny Carson show version is just hysterical. And it's called The Vegetarian's Nightmare. So that'll cheer you up after you watch Just a Dog. And there's many other ones there. They're all great. I just wanted to pick out three that I liked in particular. Again, we remember Baxter. He died at the age of 77 back last June. The next fellow that I'd like to tell you about or introduce you to died the very next day, as I understand it. And his name was Buster Welch. Now, Buster Welch has been likened to the Babe Ruth of cutting horses. He died on June the 12th of last year at the age of 94. And I'll just read you a couple of his accomplishments. He was a $1 million rider in the National Cutting Horse Association, and NCHA. And he made that accomplishment quite a number of decades back, when the money in cutting isn't like it is today. So that was quite an accomplishment. He was a 3-time NCHA Derby champion, as well as a 4-time NCHA World Champion and 5-time NCHA Futurity Champion. And for those of you who don't know, when we talk about derbies and futurities, futurities are competitions for horses that are 3 years old. And in the horse world, no matter what day of the year your horse was born, every January is his birthday, or if it's a mare, her birthday. And that, which means that if a horse was born January 5th, that a year later on January 1st, it would be 1 year old. But if it was born December 31st, then the very next day, it would be 1 year old as far as the horse show world is concerned. And since we start showing these horses as 3-year-olds, and you really can't start training them until they're 2-year-olds, because they're just not physically and mentally able to take the training. The horse world likes to have horses born as early in the year as possible. So a January birth is ideal, but you don't want to crowd it too much. And because if the baby comes a little bit early, then you're in trouble, and it diminishes the value of the horse, because they don't have an opportunity really to compete fairly in the futurities. And that's these days, a lot of the big money is in the futurities. Then as they become 4-year-olds, they go into their derby years. And depending on the discipline, whether it's cutting, rein cow horse, or other disciplines, the derbies are 4, 5, 6, and sometimes 7 years old, depending on, as I said, the discipline. By the time they're 7 years old, a horse should be completely finished, or what we call straight up in the bridle. You ride them one-handed, straight up in the bridle, completely trained. And then they are shown in maturities or just open world championships. So Buster had a knack for training a horse from start to finish. And he, as I said, he won 5 futurities, 4 derbies. And I'm not talking about local derbies. I'm talking about the World Championship Derby, and 4 World Championships. He was also inducted into the National Cutting Horse Hall of Fame, the Texas Cowboy Hall of Fame, and the American Quarter Horse Hall of Fame. He worked for a number of years for the King Ranch in South Texas, King Ranch being the largest contiguous ranch in the United States, 825,000 contiguous acres. It takes up like 3 counties way down in South Texas. They have their own breed of cattle, the Santa Gertrudis cattle, and many, or perhaps most, of the cutting horses today can trace their ancestry back to King Ranch owned or King Ranch bred horses, mares and stallions. Some of the greats that Buster Welch trained and rode and showed, won championships on, are go through just a few of them. Many of these horses, you can look on horse papers around the country at every horse show, and you'll find these horses popping up again and again on the papers of our best horses today. Mr. San Pepe, Pepe San Badger, and Dry Dock. They're just still having a tremendous impact on our industry. And also, I'll mention on a personal note that great horse trainer in my part of the world, Jay Holmes, who we trained and rode with for many years, worked for Buster Welch at the King Ranch during Buster's time there. And I believe Jay was there for 10 years when he was a young man. So a lot of us here in Florida who train and ride with Jay have had the benefit of Buster's teaching, Buster's horsemanship coming to us through Jay. So your homework is to check out a few scenes on YouTube that'll introduce you to Buster. One's pretty recent, and we were fortunate to have this scene recorded, and that is Buster Welch. Check out on YouTube Buster Welch scene on Yellowstone. Many of you are familiar with the hit TV series Yellowstone, and those of us in the Western sports world are really proud that the writer and creator, producer of Yellowstone, Taylor Sheridan, has really presented our sport very authentically. You know, a lot of the stuff on Yellowstone is pretty dramatic, but he's been really true and honest about presenting our sport. And he's done a lot for our sport through that television show and some of the offshoots, like The Last Cowboy, the Run for the Million series. So anyways, check out, there's a scene on there where Buster plays himself. He does a cameo. And along with him is another one of my favorite actors. That's Barry Corbin, who himself rode cutting horses as an amateur. So he knows what he's talking about. But there's a pretty cool scene on there with Barry Corbin and Buster Welch just chatting. And one of the stars of the show, Jimmy, is a fly on the wall to hear that conversation. Of course, at the time, Jimmy's pretty green, and he doesn't even know who he's sitting next to. And one of the ranch hands there says, Jimmy, there's three gods in Texas: the Lord Almighty himself, George Strait, and Buster Welch. And it was Buster Welch right there. And I remember sitting there before he made that line in the scene. They flashed on there. I look at it and I turned to my wife and said, Verna, that's Buster Welch. I mean, that's how well he's known. Check out also, there's a video on YouTube of just pull up Buster Welch riding. And there's a scene in there where there was a past championships class at a very large horse show, World Championship horse show, held at the Will Rogers Coliseum in Fort Worth, Texas, which is, by the way, everybody who's ridden a cutting horse with any seriousness has competed in that Coliseum, which was built in 1936 and is still going strong. I've had the good fortune to ride there myself, and so is my wife, Verna. And through those very same gates have come all of the greats. And Buster Welch is there riding, I think he's riding Betty's a Cat. Horse Betty's a Cat, who is I think is still standing stud at the 4.6s. Buster also, besides training, he had his own ranch, and I think he had more than one. He had a couple of ranches, fairly large ranches. But in his time, he worked at all the great ranches, particularly in Texas. He worked at the 4.6s besides the King Ranch. I think he worked at the Pitchfork and some others of the more prominent ranches in Texas, New Mexico, I think maybe up in Kansas as well. So he knows what he's talking about. or knew what he was talking about. And let's see what else on Buster. That's pretty much your homework. But when you go to those, when you bring up Buster Welch and bring up Buster Welch riding or Buster Welch seen on Yellowstone, it'll take you to some pretty cool stuff. Excuse me. Got a little bit of the seasonal cough. Okay. So what's made my heart so heavy is right there at the turn of the new year, I was thumbing through my phone and I discovered that one of my favorites, probably my favorite Western and country musician of all time, had passed away at the end of the year on December 29th. And his name was Ian Tyson. Ian Tyson was also a cutting horse man, but I'll get to that in a minute. But he died on the 29th, as I said, at age 89. Ian started out as a musician started and finished as a musician. He dabbled in other things as a young man, like all young men do. He did enter a few rodeos, rode some rough stock, and did some roping. And but he moved to the eastern part of Canada. He was a Canadian, born in British Columbia. He moved to Toronto in the late 50s, and it was part of the young group of artists, which included Bob Dylan and also Gordon Lightfoot, that were part of the folk music scene. And he partnered up with a lady singer named Sylvia Fricker, and they became Ian and Sylvia, and they were very popular, made many albums on the folk scene, folk type music, and Ian started writing folk music along with Bob Dylan, who was living in the same neighborhood at that time. And his first big hit was, I think, written in the very late end of the 50s or maybe very early part of the 60s, and it was titled Four Strong Winds. So you might remember Bob Dylan's Blowin' in the Wind. Ian Tyson wrote Four Strong Winds, and the song became very popular and remains so today. In fact, it's considered next to the Canadian national anthem to be the number 2 song all time in Canada. And at the opening of the the Winter Olympic Games in 1988, which was in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, Ian sang the national anthem, and then he followed it right up immediately with Four Strong Winds. And it's reported that the entire crowd was standing and singing. That everybody knew that song by heart. We as Americans have not heard that song, perhaps, by Ian Tyson, maybe not even heard of Ian Tyson at all. In fact, I kind of stumbled into him through YouTube, because you won't hear him on the radio at all, at least in the eastern part of the country. But I found him by listening to Chris Ledoux songs, and Ian and Chris both covered each other's songs and sang some of the same songs, and just like YouTube does, hey, if you like this one, check out this one. You might like this one too. And I did, and I fell in love with Ian's music and got to know more about him. So let me just put up here one of your homework assignments will be to check out Ian Tyson's Four Strong Winds. Let's see. He for a number of years while he was still living in Eastern Canada, he was so popular. He hosted his own music and variety show on Canadian TV. Again, we wouldn't see it in the United States, but it was similar to like the Glenn Campbell show back in the 60s. A lot of people my age might remember the Glenn Campbell show or the Smothers Brothers show, where they would have popular musical guests on. And in fact, speaking of the Smothers Brothers show, one of Ian's other early songs, which is my favorite Ian Tyson song, titled Someday Soon, was recorded by Judy Collins. And if you look at Judy Collins and Someday Soon on YouTube, you'll see her on the Smothers Brothers show singing Someday Soon. And I want to get back to that song again in a minute. But Ian, because of the money he made on Someday Soon and the royalties associated with that, with Judy Collins' hit recording of it, and he was able to save up enough money to buy a 300-acre ranch in Ontario. And his purpose in that was to have cattle for cutting horse practice. And he really loved rodeo, but he broke his back as a young man riding rough stock, and he was concerned. He was a tie-down roper, but he was concerned about losing a finger in roping, which is, excuse me, fairly common occurrence. And that'd be a real problem for a man who made his living picking a guitar and singing. So he took up cutting horses and became a fairly proficient non-pro cutting horse trainer. In fact, he even wrote a song about that called the Non-Pro Song, which I don't have to flash up on the screen, but you'll find the Non-Pro Song if you look at Ian Tyson's music at any length, and I can definitely relate to that song. One of the lines is, "With a little luck and he don't draw into bad cattle, he'll be riding in the finals on a Fort Worth Saturday night," which is all of our goal, to ride in that Coliseum on a Saturday night, because that's finals night. And I haven't made it yet there, but I'm still working on it, still dreaming about it. He became a regular as cowboy poetry. I was talking about Back to Black earlier. Cowboy poetry became really important to the Western world, very popular. He became a regular at the Elko Cowboy Poetry Gathering in Elko, Nevada, it's called the National Cowboy Poetry Gathering in Elko, Nevada. And the night that he and Ian Tyson played, it was the hottest ticket in town, and virtually impossible to get a ticket to see Ian live. And Ian did continue to record and write songs well into his 80s. And unfortunately, he had done serious damage to his vocal cords. And there was a period of time that he went through where he, as he said, he croaked. He didn't really sing, he just croaked. His vocal cords were severely damaged, and he finally found a doctor that helped him out and brought them back considerably. But during that time, he wrote perhaps some of the best Western and cowboy music that many people have said they've ever heard. And one of the songs that was during that period was a song called Charles Goodnight's Grave. And let me bring that up for you. If I have it on there, I don't think I do. So it's just go under Ian Tyson and bring up Charles Goodnight's Grave. And it's about visiting this lonely cemetery out in the high prairie of the Texas Panhandle, which is also known as the Llano Estacado. And it's a lonely cemetery out there that's surrounded by a chain link fence. And if you go visit the place, which I have done because of Ian's song, you'll see wild rags and bandanas tied on the chain link fence surrounding his grave as a tribute to Ian as the cowboys and cowgirls pass by. It's not far outside of Amarillo, and I had gone out to Amarillo for the World Championships and was lucky enough to make the finals in the cow horse boxing. And on my way home, we stopped by that cemetery, and I tied my wild rag on his grave just as a tribute, a thank you. Perhaps I will do another video in the future about Charles Goodnight, but it's enough to say for now that he was the father of the trail drive era. One of the first ones to drive cattle from South Texas north to meet the railroad, where there would be a way to take them to markets back east. So let's see, what else have I got to say about old Ian? the best way I could describe it is that his songs were an honest reflection of the Western way of life and Western sports. They were very authentic, and mostly songs about ranching, mostly songs about cowboying, and also the horse show world and horse training. So that brings up a couple more songs that I'd like you to check out. Oh, I did have here. Let me put that back up there. Charles Goodnight's grave. Give you a chance to write that down. Incidentally, also, many of you are familiar with the movie Lonesome Dove. If you're not, you better get familiar with it because it's a cowboy classic. But the characters, the two main characters in the movie, actually the three main characters in the movie, were modeled after Charles Goodnight and his partner Oliver Loving, and also their companion Bose Icard, who was Charles Goodnight's right-hand man throughout his life, his most trusted friend. And in the movie, the Oliver Loving part was Augustus McCrae, played by Robert Duvall, and the Bose Icard part was played by Danny Glover, but his name was oh heavens, I forgot. Forgive me. But the Danny Glover part was a portrayal of based on Bose Icard, and then Charles Goodnight was portrayed as Woodrow F. Call, played by Tommy Lee Jones. So I'll let you check that out. Charles Goodnight's grave, and he does croak a little bit on that song, but there are some other recordings out there after his voice was fixed that are better. So that brings me to horse training. He wrote a song called Hakima to Freno. In fact, this was the first Ian Tyson song I ever heard, and I thought, wow, it hits it right on the head. And the title comes from the Spanish word for Hakima, which is, as I talked about last week when I was talking about hackamores, it is a noseband or rope halter hackamore type rig, which is made out of soft rope or cotton, and it is usually what colt starters, I'm not going to call them horse breakers, I'm going to call them colt starters, the old vaqueros, the older Spanish colt starters, that's what they used to start a horse on. And they would bring them through several stages of hackamores and bits and combinations of hackamores with bits to finally get a fully trained or finished horse that they would ride in a bridle with a full bit, a full cow horse or spade bit in their mouth. And that's the Spanish word for that is freno, which also means break, as in stop. Okay, so it would be from Hakima to freno. It described the traditional horse training method originally developed by the Californios, or the vaqueros of the California region, which later became the model for the California Rein Cow Horse Association, which became the National Cow Horse Association, of which of which I'm a member and compete in. So check out Hakima to Freno. It's pretty cool. It's got a different kind of beat to it. It doesn't necessarily sound country, but it is. It's definitely Western. And then also in the ranching arena is 18 Inches of Rain. Let's see, I'm bringing it up here. 18 Inches of Rain, song about ranching. When Ian got more and more established as a recording artist and was making more and more money, he bought a ranch in southern Alberta, Canada. And for those of you who don't know, Alberta is the Texas of Canada. It's definitely cowboy country. And he bought a remote ranch, and he trained his horses and wrote his music, a lot of his music at that ranch. And he just would leave the ranch to go tour or to go show horses. So check out 18 Inches of Rain. It kind of describes the process in a humorous sort of way. And then finally, I want to come back to my favorite Ian Tyson song, which was again the first one he wrote, and it was recorded by Ian, but it's really a folk song. That it was one of the early folk songs that really had a Western theme to it, and it was about rodeo, and it was about a young lady that falls in love with a young man that is in love with rodeo. And it's written in a folk way, and in folk music, you got to understand it can be from a woman's perspective, but men and women equally can sing folk music. It's kind of gender neutral, like the old Joan Baez songs. Some of them were more gender neutral. So even though Ian wrote it and recorded it, it's still written from a woman's perspective. But I'm going to flip it around and put my spin on it. But first, I'll tell you that it was also recorded by several other people. Crystal Gale. It was the first time I ever heard it was by Crystal Gale. And then later on by Susie Bogus, who did a fabulous job on it. And there's other artists who've recorded Someday Soon as well. But it has kind of a special meaning to me because back, I don't know, about a decade ago when I was still working hot and heavy in the drugstore, and it's true for those you don't know, I am a drugstore cowboy. I'm not ashamed to admit it. In fact, I'm quite proud of it. I might be one of the few pharmacists that can ride a horse like a cowboy. Pretty darn good. I know another one. It's actually a pharmacist gal. She rides a horse pretty darn good too. And if she checks this out, she knows I'm talking about her. But I've made a living as a pharmacist, but I've been lucky enough to live in a ranching community and embrace that as well. And I probably would have liked to have been a horse trainer, but pharmacy paid a heck of a lot better, and it's enabled me to feed my horse habit. So about a decade ago, my wife and her good friend Tiffany were running for a national championship, and they were actually competing against each other and didn't know each other very well before that year. And they were both from Florida, and they were kind of running neck and neck. And the way to win that game is you got to go to a lot of horse shows. It's a cumulative thing. So you need to not just compete locally. You need to get out and stretch your legs and get out on the road some. And I was kind of concerned about my wife being on the road in a horse trailer by herself because I had to work. I had to stay home. And I said, you need to call that Tiffany girl and see if you guys can ride together. There's no sense that me and her husband both go broke over this. And she says, oh, I can't do that, Josh. She's my competitor. She won't want to work with me. Well, I said, well, why don't you just try it? And well, sure enough, they did. And they're the closest of friends now, which is the cowboy way, right? And they both went on the road, and they ran strong that year. And I'm just so proud of both of them. Tiffany won the national championship, and my wife, she's fourth. And I think that was great. I mean, to finish fourth in the nation in any endeavor is quite an accomplishment. And it was a heck of a good year, and a great friendship was forged. But I spent a lot of nights up late, all night long, sometimes drinking whiskey and listening to music and tracking their progress, trying to figure out where they were. And that was back before cell phones could tell you where to go. So I'd be calling them and saying, okay, you take a left here at this, and you get on highway this, and and then you go 206 miles and you get off there and blah, blah, blah. And they'd be riding through the night, and I'd be worrying about them. And they did have several breakdowns and little calamities or major calamities on the road. And they got through it, but I'd be listening to music, and this song came up, and it was a line in the song about riding in from long distance to get home from a rodeo. And I just kind of transferred that into my wife out on the road, traveling to get home from a horse show somewhere up in Ohio and Tennessee or Texas or wherever, Oklahoma they went. And so the song kind of struck with me that said, well, someday soon I'll be able to go with them, and I won't have to worry about them. I can take care of them on the road, and that's what we're doing today. But that song has a special meaning to me, and that's why. And I guess maybe that's why Ian has a special meaning to me. And um, if you have time, go on YouTube, check out these guys, and see why. Maybe you'll agree with me that it was a good thing that I broke away from my traditional cowboy church message today and paid tribute to three men who have helped form the Western world, the Western way of life, Western sports, Western music. So until next week, God bless. Happy trails. Adios.